She had always loved music, even before she could understand it. When she was a small child, she would hum along with any tune she heard, tapping her fingers on the edge of a table, imagining the sound of a piano under her hands. Music was not just a sound to her. It was a feeling, a world where she could escape the quiet, difficult life around her. Her family was not wealthy, and there was never room for luxuries. A piano, even a small one, was a distant dream, a toy she could not reach. Yet she held on to it in her mind, thinking of the notes, the melodies, and the songs she would one day play. Every day she watched others play music on the streets, in small gatherings, and sometimes on television. She memorized the motions, the way fingers moved, the rise and fall of each piece. She imagined herself there, pressing the keys and letting the sound fill a room. But life had other plans. She grew up helping at home, working long hours, and putting aside her own desires to take care of others. The piano stayed locked away in her dreams, untouched but never forgotten. Despite the struggles, she kept her love for music alive. Sometimes when the world was quiet at night, she would hum her favorite tunes or tap her fingers on a tabletop, pretending it was a piano. She could feel the notes under her fingers even if the instrument was not there. Friends and neighbors would notice her humming, sometimes stopping to listen, amazed at the way she remembered songs so perfectly. They would smile and say, "You have a gift." But they did not understand how much it hurt her to hear music and not play it herself. Time passed and she became an adult. The responsibilities never ended. She worked long hours to support her family and took care of her younger siblings. Even when she was exhausted, she carried music in her heart. It was her secret strength, her companion when the world felt heavy. She never spoke much about her dream, because she had learned that people often laughed at the idea of waiting for something that seemed impossible. Some said she was wasting her time, that she should focus on reality, but she could not let it go. Music was part of her, and she knew that one day, somehow, she would touch the piano herself. She spent years imagining the moment when she would finally play. In her mind, she walked into a bright room with a piano in the center. She sat down, placed her fingers on the keys, and felt the sound flow through her like a river she had been waiting to step into all her life. Each note carried a memory, a feeling, a piece of her soul. She practiced silently in her mind over and over, imagining the rhythm, the speed, the emotion. It was not the same as holding the instrument, but it kept her spirit alive. On some days, she would walk past music stores and watch the pianos through the glass. Her heart would beat faster, longing and hope mingling in her chest. She would see children, or young adults, playing with ease, their fingers moving confidently, and a pang of sadness would pass through her. But she never let it stop her. She told herself that waiting did not mean losing. It meant preparing. It meant that when her time came, she would be ready. She also found ways to learn. She borrowed books from libraries, watched videos whenever she could, and listened to music carefully, trying to understand every nuance. She memorized the pieces she loved, practicing in her mind and with whatever was available. Sometimes she found an old keyboard in a community center or a friend's house, and she would play quietly, letting the sound flow, even if it was not perfect. Those moments were precious. They reminded her that her dream was still alive, even if the world had delayed it. Friends would ask her why she cared so much about something she might never achieve. They could not understand the depth of her longing, the quiet joy she felt when imagining herself playing. They saw the practical life she led and could not see the life she lived in her heart. She smiled at them, saying it was just a hobby, but inside she held a fire that never went out. She knew that dreams sometimes waited a long time, that patience was part of the journey. Years passed and she grew stronger in her resolve. Life continued to challenge her with work, family responsibilities, and everyday struggles. Yet in the quiet moments she returned to her music. She listened to songs she loved, tapping her fingers along with the melodies, feeling the rhythm as though it were flowing through her body. She remembered the day she first imagined herself at the piano and smiled. That dream had never left her. It had grown with her, becoming a part of who she was. One day, while walking through a city park, she noticed a small stage set up with a piano in the center. People were gathering around, some playing, some waiting their turn. Her heart leaped. She stopped and watched from a distance, unsure if she should approach. The piano looked just like the one in her dreams. She felt a mixture of excitement and fear. What if she was too late? What if she had waited too long? What if she could not play as she imagined? She took a deep breath and stepped closer. The crowd did not notice her yet, and she felt a strange calm. She touched the piano lid, feeling its cool surface under her hands. Memories flooded back, the nights of silent practice, the imagined melodies, the hope she had carried all these years. She realized that this moment had been waiting for her as much as she had been waiting for it. She had always imagined the moment, but now it was real. Her hands hovered over the keys. She could hear the soft murmur of the crowd behind her, but it seemed far away. The piano was calling to her, inviting her to play, and she knew that all the years of waiting had led to this instant. She felt a strange mixture of nervousness and joy. Her dream was no longer just a thought. It was within reach. She had prepared for this moment all her life, and now it was here. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting her mind fill with the music she had carried for so many years. She imagined the first notes flowing smoothly, the melody rising and falling just as she had always pictured. She took a deep breath and let her fingers touch the keys. The sound was real, louder and richer than she had imagined. It carried the weight of years, the longing, the patience, and the love she had held for music. It was imperfect at first, but beautiful in its honesty. The crowd began to notice. Some paused to watch, curious about the woman who had approached the piano so quietly. She did not look at them. She focused on the music, letting it pour out of her. Every note told a story of waiting, of hope, of resilience. She felt the emotion rise within her, guiding her fingers across the keys. It was as though the piano had been waiting for her too, ready to share her story with anyone willing to listen. Time seemed to slow. She lost track of how long she played, immersed in the sound and the feeling. The world around her faded, leaving only the piano and the music. Each note was a piece of her soul, a reflection of the years she had spent dreaming, hoping, and preparing. She had waited a lifetime for this. Now she could finally be herself in the purest way she had ever known. When the final note lingered in the air, she opened her eyes. The crowd had grown quiet, moved by what they had just heard. Some had tears in their eyes, some had smiles of wonder, and some simply stared, unable to believe what they had witnessed. She felt a strange mixture of relief and awe. She had done it. She had waited her whole life to play, and she had finally touched the dream she had held so close to her heart. The journey had been long, but every step had been worth it. In that moment, she understood something important. Waiting does not mean giving up. It means preparing, growing, and believing that the right time will come. She had waited her whole life, but now she knew that her patience had made the experience even more powerful. She had found her place in the world, not just as someone who dreamed of music, but as someone who could share it, touch hearts, and inspire others. And as she stood there, letting the last echoes fade, she felt a joy deeper than she had ever imagined. Knowing that the music was finally hers to play, she could feel her heart beating faster as she stood before the piano. A mixture of excitement and fear swirling inside her. The crowd around her was starting to take notice, and she felt a sudden wave of doubt. What if she could not play as she imagined? What if all the years of waiting had not prepared her enough? She had dreamed of this moment for so long, but now that it was here, the fear was overwhelming. Her hands trembled slightly as she hovered over the keys, unsure if she should start. She remembered all the times she had imagined herself playing, feeling confident and perfect. But reality was different. The piano was bigger than she expected, and the room was full of eyes watching her. Some faces looked curious, some skeptical, and some impatient. She could feel their judgment even before a note had been played. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that it was not about them, it was about her. The music was hers, and no one could take that away. Memories of the past crowded her mind. She remembered the times she had been told she was too late to learn, that she should focus on responsibilities instead of dreams. She remembered the nights when she had cried quietly, thinking her chance had passed, and she remembered the small victories, the quiet moments of practice in her mind, the humming of songs in the night, and the way music had always stayed with her. She realized that those moments had prepared her for this, even if she did not feel ready now. A small boy walked by, tapping on a toy piano in a carefree way. She watched him, envying his freedom to play without fear or worry. But she also felt something else: determination. She had waited too long to turn back now. She had carried this dream for years, and it deserved to be realized. She gently lowered herself onto the piano bench, trying to calm the racing of her heart. The crowd grew quieter. Sensing something important was about to happen, her hands touched the keys lightly, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingers. It felt strange and familiar at the same time, like an old friend waiting to be embraced. She closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the melodies she had memorized over the years. She imagined each note, each rhythm, and let herself remember the countless times she had practiced silently in her mind. Slowly, she lifted her fingers and pressed down on the first key. The sound startled her at first, louder than she expected. But it was beautiful. The first few notes were hesitant, almost shy, as if her fingers were unsure of themselves. But as she continued, she began to feel the music inside her, guiding her movements. The fear started to fade, replaced by a growing confidence. She remembered all the lessons she had learned in silence: patience, perseverance, and the power of dreaming. Each note became a statement, a proof that waiting had not been wasted. She was finally playing, and it felt like coming home. The crowd watched in silence as the music filled the space. Some people whispered to each other, surprised by the skill and emotion in her playing. Others simply stopped what they were doing, unable to take their eyes off her. She had not planned to impress anyone, but she could feel that the music was connecting with them in ways she had never imagined. It was as if the years of waiting, the struggles, and the quiet practice had all led to this moment. And now it was shining through her fingers. She began to play more confidently, her hands moving with a grace she did not know she possessed. The melodies were not perfect, but they were honest and full of emotion. She could feel the story of her life flowing through the music, the longing, patience, the hope, and the joy of finally being able to express herself. Every note carried a piece of her heart, and she felt the connection with the people around her growing stronger. The fear that had gripped her moments ago was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose and fulfillment. As she played, she remembered the small acts that had kept her dream alive. The times she had listened carefully to music on the radio, trying to memorize the patterns. The times she had watched videos of musicians, imagining herself in their place. The nights she had hummed songs quietly so no one would hear. All those moments had built her strength, preparing her for this stage. She realized that even waiting could be a kind of preparation, a way to grow silently until the right moment arrived. The crowd began to respond in small ways. Heads nodded, smiles appeared, and some even wiped away tears. She felt their presence not as judgment, but as appreciation. The music had a life of its own now, carrying the story she had lived in silence for so long. She played with more freedom, letting her emotions guide her, not worrying about mistakes or imperfections. This was her music, her time, and no one could take it away. She played for what felt like hours, though it was only minutes. Each piece flowed into the next, building in intensity and emotion. She felt a joy she had never known, a connection with herself and the world around her. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a bridge between her past and present, between her dreams and reality. She realized that waiting had not weakened her. It had strengthened her resolve and made her love for music deeper. When the last note faded, she sat still for a moment, letting the silence wrap around her. The crowd erupted in applause, some standing, some clapping with tears in their eyes. She felt a rush of emotions, relief, happiness, disbelief, and pride. She had done it. She had waited her whole life, and now she had played. The journey had been long and filled with doubt, but in this moment, everything made sense. Every sacrifice, every quiet night of practice, every moment of longing had led to this instant. She looked around at the people who had gathered. realizing that they were not judging her but witnessing something special. She had shared her heart through the music, and it had touched them. For the first time in her life, she felt seen and understood. The piano had become a voice for all the words she had never spoken, all the dreams she had held in silence. She knew that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more doubts. But she had proven to herself that her dream was possible as she stood and stepped away from the piano. She felt a new confidence rising within her. She had faced the fear, embraced the moment, and let the music flow. She understood that life could be hard and waiting could be painful, but patience and perseverance could lead to something beautiful. The world had not changed, but she had. She had found her voice, and it was stronger than ever. Walking away from the stage, she knew that her life would never be the same. The dream that had lived quietly inside her heart for so many years was now real, tangible, and powerful. She had waited, and now she had played. And in that act, she had discovered a truth she would carry forever. Dreams may take time, but when the moment comes, they have the power to change everything. She could feel the echoes of the piano notes, still in her mind as she walked away from the stage, but her heart was restless. She had played, yes, but something deep inside told her this was only the beginning. She could not stop thinking about the way the crowd had reacted, the way their eyes had followed her fingers as they moved across the keys. Every face told a story of surprise, admiration, and wonder. She had shared a piece of herself with the world, and the experience lingered in her thoughts like a melody that refuses to fade. That night, she lay awake in her small room, the faint glow of the moon through the window lighting the familiar surroundings. She thought about the piano, the crowd, and the music that had filled the air. She remembered the fear she had felt just moments before playing, the hesitation in her fingers, and how that fear had melted away as the notes flowed. The memory made her heart swell with emotion. For the first time in her life, she truly believed that her patience and persistence had been worth it. The next day, she could not stop replaying the experience in her mind. She remembered the first hesitant notes and how the piano seemed to respond to her, almost as if it recognized her longing and years of waiting. She thought about the faces in the crowd, their eyes wide with amazement, and she realized how powerful music could be. It had the ability to touch people in ways words never could. She felt a sense of responsibility, knowing that her gift was not only for herself, but could also inspire others. She returned to the park the following days, drawn back by the memory of the piano. The stage was set up again, though not as crowded as before. She observed quietly from a distance, watching others play, noticing their techniques, the confidence in their hands, and the expressions on their faces. Each musician told a story, and she felt a growing desire to continue her own. She realized that the piano was more than an instrument. It was a voice that could share her journey, her struggles, and her hopes. Her first few visits were quiet. She sat on a nearby bench, listening and learning, letting the music guide her thoughts. She practiced in her mind, imagining her fingers pressing the keys, perfecting the melodies she had always held close. The anticipation built with each visit, and she felt her confidence growing. The piano was no longer intimidating. It had become a friend waiting for her return, ready to help her express what had been hidden inside her for so many years. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, she decided to approach the piano again. Her hands trembled slightly, but this time the fear was different. It was no longer paralyzing, but a reminder that what she was about to do mattered deeply. She sat on the bench, placing her fingers lightly on the keys. She closed her eyes, letting the music she had carried for a lifetime flow through her mind. Then slowly she began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, but filled with emotion. She allowed herself to feel every chord, every melody, letting it tell the story of her life. She remembered the long nights of dreaming, the times she had felt invisible, the sacrifices she had made, and the hope that had never left her. Each note carried her experiences, her longing, and her joy. The sound was imperfect yet beautiful in its honesty, and it spoke directly to the hearts of anyone listening. A small crowd gathered as the music floated through the air. People paused their conversations, some stopping in surprise, as they heard the depth of feeling in her playing. She noticed a few children watching intently, their eyes wide with fascination. She smiled quietly to herself, realizing that her music could inspire others, even in ways she had not imagined. She had waited for this moment her whole life. Now she understood that her patience was creating something much bigger than herself. As she continued to play, she became more confident. Her fingers moved with increasing ease, guided by years of silent preparation and imagination. She played melodies she had memorized and sometimes improvised, letting her emotions guide her. The music filled the space, weaving a tapestry of sound that carried the story of her waiting, her longing, and the joy of finally being able to express herself. She felt connected to the world around her in a way she had never felt before. The crowd was mesmerized. People whispered to each other, exchanging looks of amazement. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the honesty and depth of her playing. She could feel their emotions blending with hers, creating a shared experience that was both intimate and universal. The piano had become a bridge between her world and theirs. She understood that her music had the power to touch hearts in ways that words never could. Time passed unnoticed as she played. She lost herself in the rhythm, in the flow of notes that seemed to have a life of their own. She was not performing for recognition or applause. She was expressing herself, sharing the story that had lived quietly inside her for so long. Each note carried the weight of her years of waiting, the struggles she had faced, and the hope that had never faded. She felt a sense of liberation, as if a part of her soul that had been held back for decades was finally free. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, the silence hung in the air for a moment, heavy and profound. Then, slowly, applause began to build. The sound was warm and genuine, filled with admiration and respect. She felt a rush of emotion, realizing that her music had reached the hearts of the people around her. She had waited so long for this moment, and now it was here. It's more powerful than she had ever imagined. The experience left her both exhilarated and exhausted. She walked away from the piano slowly, letting the music linger in her mind. She knew that she had discovered something important, not just her ability to play, but the truth that dreams, even when delayed, could still be realized. She had waited her whole life, and that waiting had made the music richer. It's more meaningful and deeply personal. In the days that followed, she found herself thinking constantly about the piano. She returned to the park whenever she could, playing for small groups, observing other musicians, and allowing herself to grow. Each session strengthened her skills and her confidence. She realized that her journey was just beginning, that the world of music held endless possibilities, and that she had only scratched the surface of what she could achieve. She also noticed the subtle ways her music affected others. A young girl would hum along, a man would stop and listen. Tears would appear in the eyes of strangers. She realized that the gift she had carried silently for so long was now becoming a source of connection, inspiration, and joy. She understood that waiting had not been wasted. It had prepared her to share something truly meaningful with the world. The piano was no longer just an object. It had become a symbol of her perseverance, her hope, and her love for music. Every time she sat down to play, she felt the years of waiting transform into power and expression. She had learned that patience was not passive. It was active, building strength, resilience, and understanding. She had waited her whole life. Now she was ready to embrace the full potential of her dream. She approached the piano that afternoon with a calm but excited heart. The sunlight streamed through the trees, casting long shadows on the stage. The crowd was already there, small at first, but people had begun to gather, curious about who would play today. She could feel their attention, their quiet whispers, and she realized that she was no longer invisible. She was here, standing at the piano, ready to let the music flow from her fingers. Her heart pounded with both excitement and nervousness. But she remembered that this moment belonged to her, not anyone else. Her hands hovered over the keys, trembling slightly as memories of the past rushed back. She remembered the countless nights of imagining herself playing, the silent practice in her mind, and the longing that had carried her through years of waiting. She could almost hear the music she had created in her dreams, and now it was real, waiting for her touch. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and let her fingers press down on the first notes. The sound resonated through the air, soft at first. But growing with confidence, the music began to flow naturally, each note carrying emotion she had never shared before. Her fingers moved with grace, guided by years of imagination and silent practice. The melodies were familiar, yet new, reflecting the journey she had taken to arrive at this moment. She felt a connection with the piano, as if it recognized the years of longing and patience she had poured into her dream. The music spoke louder than words, telling a story of waiting, hope, and finally, fulfillment. The crowd grew quiet, sensing something extraordinary in the music. People stopped walking, children ceased playing, and even the wind seemed to pause. They were captivated by the sound, not just for its beauty, but for the emotion it carried. Each note seemed to reach deep into their hearts, telling a story they had not heard before. She noticed a few people with tears in their eyes, their expressions filled with awe and admiration. She realized that music could connect people in ways nothing else could, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. As she continued to play, the music became bolder, freer. She allowed herself to improvise, letting her emotions guide her fingers across the keys. She remembered the struggles she had faced, the years she had waited, and the sacrifices she had made. All of that flowed through her playing, creating a melody that was uniquely hers. She felt alive in a way she had never experienced before, her heart and soul opening with every note. The piano was no longer an instrument. It was an extension of herself. The audience reacted in ways she had never imagined. Some clapped softly, some whispered words of encouragement, and some simply sat, entranced by the music. She felt their energy, their emotions intertwining with hers, creating a shared moment of beauty. She realized that her dream was no longer hers alone. It was touching the lives of others. The realization filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known. Her music could inspire comfort and move people in ways that words could not. She continued playing, losing herself in the rhythm and flow. Each note was a reflection of her journey, a testimony to the years she had spent dreaming, waiting, and believing. The music told a story of patience and perseverance, of hope that refused to die, and of joy that comes from finally achieving a long-held dream. She felt the power of her own voice through the piano, and it was exhilarating. She had waited her whole life, and now the world could hear the depth of her soul. The final notes lingered in the air, a soft echo that seemed to fill every corner of the park. For a moment, there was complete silence. The crowd held its breath, not wanting to break the magic of the moment. She felt a wave of emotion, tears welling in her eyes as she realized the significance of what she had just done. She had shared something deeply personal, and it had been received with love, admiration, and understanding. She had proven to herself that waiting and patience were not wasted, that dreams, no matter how delayed, could be realized. Applause erupted, breaking the silence with warmth and energy. People stood, clapping, cheering, and smiling, their reactions filled with genuine admiration. She felt a rush of emotions: relief, happiness, pride, and gratitude. The music had done its work. It had conveyed the story she had held in her heart for so long. She looked at the faces around her, seeing the awe and appreciation, and knew that her music had left an imprint on them. The applause was not just for her playing. It was for the journey, for the patience, and for the heart she had poured into every note. She stood slowly, her hands still tingling from the piano, and took in the scene around her. People were talking quietly, some wiping away tears, others exchanging smiles of wonder. She felt a deep connection with them, a shared understanding that transcended words. Music had become a bridge between her world and theirs, a language that spoke of dreams, waiting, and the fulfillment that comes from never giving up. She realized that this was more than just a moment of personal triumph. It was a testament to the power of hope and perseverance. Walking away from the piano, she felt a sense of peace and accomplishment. The fear that had once gripped her was replaced by confidence and joy. She had faced her doubts, embraced the moment, and allowed the music to speak for her. She understood that life could be challenging, that waiting could be painful, but that patience and determination could lead to something beautiful. Her dream had not been delayed for nothing. It had grown stronger, deeper, and more meaningful over the years. In the days that followed, she returned to the piano often, each time feeling a stronger connection with herself and the music. She experimented with new melodies, explored different rhythms, and allowed her emotions to guide her. Each session strengthened her skills, her confidence, and her belief in the power of her dreams. She began to notice the subtle ways her music influenced others, a child learning to play along, a listener finding comfort in her melodies, a passerby smiling in surprise. She realized that her gift was not just for herself. It was meant to touch the hearts of others. The piano became a symbol of her perseverance, her hope, and her love for music. Every time she played, she felt the years of waiting transform into strength, resilience, and expression. She understood that dreams could take time, that waiting did not mean giving up, and that the journey itself was a vital part of the reward. She had waited her whole life, and now the piano was a testament to the power of patience, belief, and unwavering hope. With each note, she continued to tell her story, sharing the emotions she had kept hidden for so long. The crowd grew, and people began to recognize her as the woman who had transformed waiting into music. She felt a sense of pride, not in seeking recognition, but in knowing that her journey had inspired others. The music had the power to move people, to connect souls, and to show that dreams, no matter how delayed, could still come true. She had waited her whole life to play, and now the world had heard her story. She woke up early that morning, feeling a sense of anticipation she had not felt in years. Today felt different. The piano had become more than an instrument to her. It had become a companion, a teacher, and a voice for her dreams. She knew that the journey she had begun was now moving into a new chapter. Her mind was filled with music, melodies she had imagined for decades now, ready to flow freely. She dressed quickly and made her way to the park, carrying a quiet confidence that was new and exhilarating. The stage was set, the piano waiting in the sunlight. People had begun to gather, some familiar from previous days, and some new faces drawn by curiosity. She could feel the energy in the air, the subtle anticipation of those who sensed something special was about to happen. She walked calmly to the piano, her hands brushing over the keys gently. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memories of her journey fill her mind. Every note she was about to play carried her past, her struggles, her patience, and her hope. She knew this was her moment to share it all. Her fingers pressed the first key, and the sound resonated through the park. She played softly at first, letting the music flow naturally, letting it tell the story of her life. The crowd grew silent, captivated by the emotion in each note. She allowed herself to feel every chord, to let the piano carry her longing, her dreams, and her joy. Each note seemed to touch the hearts of those listening, creating a connection that was deep and unspoken. She realized that this was the true power of music, the ability to speak without words, to share something profoundly human. As she continued, her playing grew bolder. She explored new melodies and allowed herself to improvise, letting her emotions guide her hands. The music was alive, reflecting not only her past but her present, the joy of finally fulfilling a long-held dream. She could feel the energy of the crowd responding, their attention fully on her, yet she felt no pressure. She played not for them but for herself, for the dream she had carried silently for so many years. And in that act she discovered a freedom she had never known. The crowd watched in awe. Some people had tears in their eyes, others smiled quietly, and a few simply sat in stunned silence. She could feel their emotions intertwining with hers, creating a shared experience that was both intimate and universal. She had waited her whole life for this moment, and now it was here, more powerful than she had imagined. She understood that her patience, her perseverance, and her unwavering belief had brought her to a place where her music could touch others in meaningful ways. She remembered the nights when she had dreamed of playing, when the piano existed only in her imagination. She recalled the times she had faced doubts, the voices telling her she was too late or that her dreams were unrealistic. Yet she had persisted, holding on to hope and preparing in silence. And now, all those years of waiting had transformed into strength, skill, and confidence. The music was no longer just a dream. It was reality, alive and vibrant under her fingers as she played. She noticed small gestures from the audience, a child tapping along, an older woman smiling with recognition, a man nodding in appreciation. Each reaction reminded her that her music was more than a personal triumph. It was a gift she could share with the world. She understood that waiting had not diminished her dream. It had enriched it, giving depth and meaning to every note she played. The music carried her story, and in doing so, it inspired others to believe in their own dreams, no matter how long they had waited. The sun began to set, casting warm golden light across the park. She played a final, heartfelt piece, letting the melody rise and fall with the emotion she had carried for so long. Each note was a testament to her journey, a reflection of patience, hope, and resilience. When she pressed the last key, silence hung in the air for a moment, a quiet acknowledgement of the power of what had just been shared. Then, gradually, applause erupted, growing louder, warmer, and more genuine with each clap. She stood, taking in the faces around her, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. The applause was not just for her playing, but for her journey, for the courage to wait, for the strength to continue believing in her dream despite the odds. She felt tears in her eyes, not from sadness, but from a deep sense of gratitude and joy. She had waited her whole life to play. Now her dream was no longer distant. It was here, alive in every note and every smile in the crowd. She realized that the waiting had been an essential part of her story, shaping her resilience and allowing her to fully embrace the moment. After the performance, people came forward to speak with her, expressing admiration, sharing their own stories, and thanking her for the music that had touched them so deeply. She listened, humbled by the impact her playing had on others. She understood that her journey was not just about achieving a personal dream, but about sharing it in a way that could inspire, comfort, and connect people. Her music had become a bridge, linking hearts and souls in a way she had never anticipated. As the crowd slowly dispersed, she sat by the piano, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the quiet nights of practice in her mind, the dreams she had held onto through years of challenges, and the unwavering hope that had guided her. She understood that life's delays had not been obstacles, but part of the process that had prepared her to play with authenticity and depth. The piano was no longer just an instrument, it was a symbol of her patience, perseverance, and love for music. She left the park that evening with a light heart and a sense of purpose. She knew that the journey was far from over. There would be more music to create, more melodies to explore, and more hearts to touch. But she also knew that she had reached a turning point, a moment where her dream had fully arrived. The years of waiting had been meaningful, teaching her patience, resilience, and the power of believing in oneself. She had waited her whole life, and in doing so, she had discovered the profound joy of realizing a long-held dream in the days that followed. She continued to play whenever she could, each performance bringing new confidence, skill, and joy. She experimented with new pieces, improvised freely, and allowed her emotions to guide her music. People began to recognize her, drawn by the stories of the woman who had waited a lifetime to play and whose music now touched everyone who listened. She became an inspiration to those who felt it was too late for their own dreams. A living example that patience and perseverance could lead to extraordinary results. Through her music, she had learned that waiting was not wasted time. Every challenge, every moment of doubt, and every silent night of practice had shaped her, made her stronger, and enriched her dream. She had waited her whole life to play. Now the piano was not just an instrument. It was her voice, her story, and her gift to the world. She had discovered the truth that dreams may take time, but when realized, they have the power to change everything, not just for oneself, but for everyone they touch. Even though she had played the piano countless times now, the excitement never faded. Each time she approached it, she felt the same mix of nerves and joy that she had felt on the very first day. Music had become her life, a companion that never left her side. It was more than sound. It was emotion, memory, hope, and expression, all at once. She knew that each note she played told her story, the story of waiting, patience, and finally living a dream that had once seemed impossible. That morning, she walked through the park earlier than usual. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting soft shadows across the pathway. The piano sat waiting, familiar and welcoming, almost as if it were greeting her. She took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill her lungs, and approached the instrument. Today felt different. She was not only playing for herself, she had begun to realize the impact her music could have on others. Every note was now a message, a gift for the people who listened. As she sat down, her fingers hovering over the keys, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. Years of dreaming, of imagining herself playing, of silent practice in her mind had prepared her for this moment. She had faced doubts, fears, and obstacles, but she had never given up. That persistence, that quiet determination, finally allowed her to stand here, ready to share her music with the world. She placed her fingers on the keys and closed her eyes, letting the memories guide her. The first notes were gentle, floating into the park like a soft breeze. She allowed herself to feel the music, letting it rise naturally from her emotions. Each melody reflected her experiences, the challenges, the small victories, the patience that had defined her life. As she played, she could feel the crowd around her growing curious. People paused their conversations and began to listen, drawn in by the emotion in the notes. She did not rush. She let the music take its own path, letting her feelings guide her hands. She remembered the very first day she had played in the park. The fear that had gripped her, the hesitation, the doubt, all of it, had seemed so strong then. But now, years later, she understood that those moments had been essential. They had shaped her, teaching her resilience and patience, allowing her to fully appreciate every note she played. Each performance was now richer, more emotional, and full of meaning. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a reflection of her soul. The audience had grown over time. Some were regular visitors. Others had heard about the woman who had waited her whole life to play. She saw people watching with admiration, their eyes fixed on her, captivated by the honesty in her music. Children tapped their fingers to the rhythm. Older listeners closed their eyes to absorb the melodies, and some simply smiled, moved by the story she was telling without words. She realized that music was a universal language, capable of connecting people in ways that words could not. She let herself explore new melodies, experimenting with rhythms and harmonies she had never dared to try before. Her fingers moved with confidence, guided by years of experience and the deep love she had for music. She could feel her emotions pouring into each note, the joy of fulfilling a lifelong dream, the relief of finally expressing herself, and the desire to inspire others. Every chord carried her story. She played not only for herself but for everyone who listened. As she played, she felt the weight of her past lifting. All the years of waiting, the moments of doubt, the times she had thought her dream would never come true, they all seemed to have a purpose. Each struggle had prepared her for this moment, shaping her skill and deepening her understanding of music and life. She realized that waiting was not wasted time. It was a form of preparation, a way to strengthen the heart and soul. Her music now carried that wisdom, resonating with anyone who would listen. The crowd responded subtly at first, then more openly. People whispered to each other, amazed at the skill and emotion in her playing. Some had tears in their eyes, some simply nodded in appreciation, and a few children tried to hum along. She noticed their reactions, but she did not let it distract her. The music was flowing naturally, and she let it guide her through the story she wanted to tell. She could feel the connection growing, a shared experience that transcended words and made everyone present feel part of something special. Time passed unnoticed as she played. Each note was a reflection of her journey, a testament to patience, perseverance, and the joy of finally achieving her dream. The park seemed to fade around her, leaving only her, the piano, and the music. She understood that this was more than performance. It was an expression of her life, her heart, and the dream she had nurtured for decades. She played with abandon, letting the music carry her forward, free of doubt and fear. When she finally reached the last note, she allowed it to linger, holding the silence before the applause. The moment was profound, a quiet acknowledgement of everything that had led to this instant. Slowly, the crowd began to clap, softly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. She felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride, relief, and gratitude. The applause was more than recognition of her skill. It was recognition of her journey, her persistence, her courage to never give up. She stood, her hands still tingling from the piano, and looked around at the faces before her. People were smiling, wiping away tears, and exchanging glances of admiration. She felt a sense of connection with each one of them, understanding that her music had reached beyond herself to touch their hearts. She realized that the waiting, the patience, and the perseverance had not been just for her own fulfillment. They had created something meaningful for others as well. The dream she had held so long had become a source of inspiration. As the crowd slowly dispersed, she stayed for a moment, reflecting on her journey. She thought about the nights she had spent imagining herself playing, the silent practice in her mind, and the hope that had carried her through years of waiting. She understood that the delays, the challenges, and the doubts had all contributed to the depth of her music and her emotional connection to it. She had waited her whole life, and now the reward was not just the act of playing, but the joy of sharing her dream with others. Walking away from the piano, she felt a sense of peace and purpose. She knew that the journey was far from over. There would be more music to create, more hearts to touch, and more experiences to share. But she also knew that she had reached a milestone, a moment where her dream had fully taken form. The years of waiting had given her strength, insight, and a deeper appreciation for what it meant to pursue a lifelong goal. She had waited patiently, and now she could finally live her dream fully in the days that followed. She continued to return to the piano, each session bringing new discoveries and inspiration. She experimented with different melodies, improvising and creating music that reflected her growth and experiences. She saw the reactions of people around her, noticing the way her music inspired hope, comfort, and admiration. Her performances became a source of connection, showing that dreams, even when delayed, could still come true if pursued with patience and passion. Through her music, she had learned a profound truth. Waiting is not wasted time. Every challenge, every moment of doubt, and every silent dream had shaped her into the person she was. She had waited her whole life to play. Now the piano was more than an instrument. It was a voice, a story, and a gift she could share with the world. She had discovered that dreams, no matter how long they take, have the power to transform lives. It's not only for the dreamer, but for everyone touched by their realization.